On a frigid February night in 2004, the snowy wilderness of New Hampshire swallowed a young woman whole, leaving behind a riddle that has haunted the nation for over 2 decades. Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student with a promising future, was driving alone on a desolate road when her car skidded into a snowbank. She was last seen standing by her vehicle, shivering in the bitter cold, her breath visible in the icy air. Within minutes, she vanished, without a trace, without a sound, without a clue. Her disappearance in the White Mountains sparked one of America's most enduring mysteries, a case that has defied answers despite relentless searches, countless theories, and the rise of online sleuths determined to solve it. Was Maura a victim of foul play, a young woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Did she flee her life, overwhelmed by personal struggles she could no longer bear? Or did the unforgiving landscape claim her, as it has so many others? This story delves into the enigma of Maura Murray's vanishing, exploring the fragile threads of her life, the weight of her unspoken burdens, and the desperate quest of a family to uncover the truth. A truth that, as of April 2025, remains as elusive as a shadow in the snow. Maura Murray's story begins in the small town of Hampshire, Massachusetts, where she was born on May 4, 1982, to Fred and Lori Murray. She was the fourth of 5 children in a close-knit family, growing up in a modest home surrounded by the quiet beauty of New England. Hampshire, located about 20 miles south of Boston, was a quintessential small town with tree-lined streets, community events, and a tight community where neighbors knew each other by name. The town's population hovered around 10,000, and its charm lay in its simplicity. There were local diners where families gathered after church, parks where kids played Little League baseball, and annual festivals like the Hampshire Harvest Fair that brought the community together. Maura's childhood was shaped by this backdrop, a place where she could ride her bike down quiet streets, explore the woods behind her house, and dream about the world beyond her small town. Maura's father, Fred, worked as a medical technician, often putting in long hours to support the family, while her mother, Lori, was a nurse, a profession that would later inspire Maura's own career path. Fred was a tall, wiry man with a no-nonsense demeanor, known for his dedication to his children. He often took the family on camping trips to the White Mountains of New Hampshire, where they would hike trails, fish in clear streams, and roast marshmallows over a campfire. These trips were some of Maura's happiest memories, and she developed a deep love for the outdoors, particularly the rugged beauty of the mountains. Lori, on the other hand, was the emotional anchor of the family, a gentle woman with a warm smile who taught her children the importance of compassion and resilience. She often worked night shifts at a local hospital, coming home in the early morning hours to make breakfast for her kids before they headed off to school. Despite their demanding schedules, Fred and Lori made sure their children felt loved and supported, instilling in them a strong work ethic and a sense of independence. The Murrays were a family of doers, hardworking, resilient, and deeply connected to each other, even after Fred and Lori divorced when Maura was 6 years old. The divorce was amicable, and both parents remained active in their children's lives, splitting holidays and weekends to ensure the kids felt the stability of a 2-parent household. Maura, as the second youngest, was particularly close to her older sister Julie, who was 3 years her senior. Julie was a protective older sibling, often looking out for Maura during their childhood games, and later becoming her confidant as they grew older. The siblings, Fred Jr., Kathleen, Julie, Maura, and Kurt, shared a tight bond, often spending summers at their grandparents' house in nearby Brockton, where they would play hide-and-seek in the backyard and listen to their grandfather's stories about his days as a fisherman. Maura's early years were filled with these moments of joy, but the divorce did leave its mark, teaching her at a young age to navigate change and uncertainty with a quiet strength that would define much of her life. As a child, Maura was a bundle of energy, always on the move, her laughter filling the house. Her siblings often teased her for her competitive streak, which showed itself early on in games of tag or races around the backyard. She had a natural athleticism, which became evident when she joined the track team at Whitman-Hanson Regional High School. Maura excelled in long-distance running, her slim frame and determined stride making her a standout on the team. She often trained on the trails near her house, running for miles through the woods, her mind focused on the rhythm of her breathing and the steady beat of her sneakers against the dirt. Her coach, Mike Sullivan, later recalled Maura's dedication in a 2005 interview with the Patriot Ledger, saying, "She was one of those kids who never gave up, no matter how tough the race got. She had this fire in her, this drive to push herself harder than anyone else." Maura's competitive spirit wasn't limited to sports. She was also a straight-A student, excelling in math and science, subjects that came naturally to her analytical mind. Her teachers often praised her for her curiosity, noting that she was the kind of student who asked thoughtful questions and stayed late to finish her work. Maura's high school years were a time of growth and discovery. She was popular among her peers, known for her quick wit and infectious smile, but she was also reserved, preferring deep conversations with a few close friends over large social gatherings. Her best friend, Kate Markopoulos, who later spoke about Maura on the Oxygen documentary The Disappearance of Maura Murray in 2017, described her as someone who could light up a room, but also had this quiet side to her, like she was always thinking about something deeper. Maura was involved in several extracurricular activities, including the National Honor Society and the school's environmental club, where she helped organize cleanups of local parks and advocated for recycling programs. She also volunteered at a nearby nursing home, spending weekends reading to elderly residents and helping with activities like bingo night. These experiences sparked an interest in nursing, a career she saw as a way to combine her love for science with her desire to make a difference in people's lives. In 2000, Maura graduated from Whitman-Hanson with honors, earning a congressional nomination from Senator Edward Kennedy to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point. The nomination was a testament to her academic and athletic achievements, as well as her leadership potential. Maura was thrilled at the opportunity, seeing West Point as a chance to challenge herself and build a foundation for her future. She followed in the footsteps of her sister Julie, who had also attended West Point and was now serving in the Army. That summer, Maura packed her bags and headed to New York, ready to embrace the rigors of military life. Her family gathered to see her off, Fred giving her a long hug and whispering, "I'm so proud of you, kiddo," as she boarded the bus to West Point. It was a moment of pride for the Mauys, a sign that Maura was on her way to achieving great things. At West Point, Maura enrolled in the chemical engineering program, a demanding major that required a strong grasp of math, physics, and problem solving. The academy's strict environment was a stark contrast to the freedom she had enjoyed in Hanson, with its early morning drills, rigid schedules, and high expectations for discipline. Maura threw herself into her studies, often staying up late in the barracks to finish problem sets or prepare for inspections. She also joined the track team, where her long-distance running skills earned her a spot on the varsity squad. It was during one of these track meets that she met Bill Roche, a fellow cadet who shared her love for running and her competitive spirit. Bill, a tall, broad-shouldered young man with a quiet intensity, was a year ahead of Maura at West Point, studying engineering and preparing for a career in the Army. The two bonded over their shared experiences at the academy, often running together along the Hudson River and talking about their dreams for the future. Their relationship quickly deepened, and by the end of Maura's first semester, they were officially a couple, spending weekends exploring the nearby town of Highland Falls and dreaming about life after graduation. Despite her success at West Point, Maura struggled with the academy's rigid structure. The constant pressure to perform, combined with the lack of personal freedom, began to take a toll on her. She missed the spontaneity of her life back home, the ability to go for a run whenever she wanted or spend a quiet evening with her family. She also faced challenges in her relationship with Bill, who was under his own pressures as a senior cadet. In 2002, after 3 semesters, Maura made the difficult decision to leave West Point. It was a choice that surprised her family, who had seen her thrive in the academy's competitive environment, but Maura knew it was the right move for her. She wanted a path that allowed her to pursue her passion for helping others, and she believed nursing would give her that opportunity. She transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, enrolling in the nursing program and settling into a new chapter of her life. At UMass, Maura found a sense of freedom she had missed at West Point. The sprawling campus, with its mix of historic brick buildings and modern facilities, offered a vibrant community where she could explore her interests and build new friendships. She moved into a dorm in the Southwest residential area, a bustling part of campus known for its lively atmosphere, and quickly made friends with her floor mates. Maura balanced her nursing studies with a part-time job at the campus security desk in Melville Hall, where she monitored student IDs and handled late-night emergencies. She also secured a clinical placement at a local hospital, where she shadowed nurses, assisted with patient care, and gained hands-on experience that reinforced her love for the profession. Her professors praised her dedication, noting her ability to connect with patients and her meticulous attention to detail in her coursework. Maura had a natural empathy, her clinical instructor, Sarah Bennett, later told the Boston Globe in 2014. She could make even the most nervous patients feel at ease, and she was always asking questions to learn more. Maura's life at UMass seemed to be on track, but beneath her outward success, she was grappling with personal struggles that would later become a focal point in understanding her disappearance. In November 2003, she was caught using a stolen credit card number to order food online, a misdemeanor charge that stemmed from a moment of poor judgment. Maura had been struggling financially, often working extra shifts to cover her expenses, and the temptation to use a credit card number she found online was too great. The incident was a blow to her self-esteem. She was terrified that it would jeopardize her nursing career, a fear that lingered even after the charge was dismissed on the condition she maintain good behavior for 3 months. She confided in her sister Julie about the incident, admitting that she felt ashamed and worried about her future. Julie reassured her, saying, "We all make mistakes, Maura. You'll get through this." But the weight of the mistake stayed with her, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. Maura's relationship with Bill Roche, who had graduated from West Point and was now stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, also faced challenges during this time. The long-distance nature of their relationship was difficult, with Maura at UMass and Bill thousands of miles away. They kept in touch through emails, phone calls, and occasional visits, but tensions arose as both navigated the pressures of their respective paths. Bill had been accused of infidelity by mutual friends, a rumor that hurt Maura deeply and led to several heated arguments. At the same time, Maura had grown close to her track coach at UMass, Hossein Baghdadi, a relationship that sparked rumors of an affair among her teammates. While there was no concrete evidence of infidelity on Maura's part, the rumors added strain to her relationship with Bill, leaving her feeling torn between her loyalty to him and her own emotional needs. In a January 2004 email to Bill, Maura wrote, "I miss you so much, but I don't know if I can keep doing this. I need to figure out what I want," a message that hinted at the uncertainty she felt about their future together. Despite these challenges, Maura remained focused on her goals, determined to build a life that reflected her values and passions. She was known among her friends for her thoughtfulness, always the one to remember birthdays, send encouraging notes before exams, and offer a listening ear when someone needed to talk. Her roommate, Emily Carter, later shared a memory with the Massachusetts Daily Collegian in 2019, recalling how Maura once stayed up all night to help her study for a biology exam, quizzing her on flashcards until the sun came up. "She was the kind of friend who made you feel seen," Emily said, her voice breaking with emotion. Maura's kindness extended to her family as well. She often called her father to check in, asking about his day and sharing stories from her clinical rotations, and she made a point to visit her mother in Hanson whenever she could, bringing her small gifts like a bouquet of flowers or a new book to read during her hospital shifts. As 2004 began, Maura's life seemed to be a balancing act between her ambitions and her struggles. She was excelling in her nursing program, with plans to graduate in 2005 and pursue a career in pediatric nursing, a specialty that appealed to her love for children. She was also training for a half marathon, her running shoes a constant companion as she logged miles around the UMass campus, her mind clearing with each step. But the pressures of her legal trouble, her strained relationship with Bill, and the demands of her academic and work schedule were taking a toll. She often felt overwhelmed, confiding in Kate Markopoulos that she sometimes didn't know how to keep it all together. "I just need a break," Maura told her one evening in late January 2004, as they sat in a campus coffee shop, sipping lattes and watching snow fall outside. Kate urged her to take some time for herself, unaware that Maura's need for a break would soon lead her to a decision that would change everything. On February 7, 2004, Fred Murray drove to Amherst to spend the weekend with Maura, a visit that would later become a critical piece of the puzzle surrounding her disappearance. The two had always been close, and Fred wanted to help Maura find a new car. Her 1996 Saturn sedan was in poor condition, with a failing engine that emitted plumes of smoke and a dashboard that rattled ominously on every drive. They spent the day test driving vehicles at local dealerships, but none felt right, and Maura decided to hold off on a purchase. That evening, Fred gave Maura $4,000 in cash to help with expenses, a gesture that reflected his unwavering support for his daughter. He later recalled their conversation in a 2014 interview with the Boston Globe, saying, "I told her to take care of herself, to not let the stress get to her. She hugged me and said, 'I love you, Dad.' That was the last time I saw her." The weekend marked the beginning of a series of events that would lead Maura to that snowy road in New Hampshire, a journey that would end in mystery and leave her family searching for answers for over 2 decades. Maura Murray's life was one of promise, a young woman with a bright future, a competitive spirit, and a heart full of compassion. But beneath her achievements lay a complexity that few fully understood, a tangle of pressures and emotions that would come to light only after she vanished. Her story is not just about the night she disappeared, but about the life she led before that moment, the dreams she held, and the struggles she faced in silence. As we trace her path from Hanson to West Point to UMass, we begin to see the portrait of a young woman on the cusp of greatness, whose life was interrupted by a mystery that has yet to be solved, a mystery that began with a promise and continues with a search for truth. The weekend of February 7th to 8th, 2004, was a pivotal moment in Maura Murray's life, a 48-hour span that would later be scrutinized by investigators, family, and amateur sleuths alike as they sought to understand why a promising young nursing student vanished without a trace. Maura, a 21-year-old junior at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, was already navigating a complex web of pressures, academic demands, a strained long-distance relationship with her boyfriend Bill Roche, and lingering guilt over a credit card fraud incident from November 2003 that threatened her nursing career. The events of that weekend, marked by emotional turmoil, a car accident, and a mysterious phone call, would reveal a young woman on the edge, grappling with stressors that may have driven her to make the fateful decision to leave Amherst and head north to New Hampshire on February 9th. This chapter delves into those critical days, piecing together Maura's actions, her state of mind, and the subtle clues that hinted at the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior. The weekend began with a sense of normalcy as Maura's father, Fred Murray, drove from his home in Connecticut to Amherst to spend time with his daughter. Fred, a medical technician with a deep devotion to his 5 children, had always been a steady presence in Maura's life, especially after his divorce from her mother, Lori, when Maura was 6. He often made the 3-hour drive to UMass to check on Maura, bringing her groceries, taking her out for meals, and offering the kind of practical support that made her feel grounded. On Saturday, February 7th, Fred arrived in Amherst around noon, pulling into the parking lot of Maura's dorm in the Southwest residential area. The Southwest Towers, a cluster of high-rise dorms on the UMass campus, were a hub of student activity, with their brick facades and wide windows overlooking the sprawling campus. Maura lived on the ninth floor of Kennedy Tower, a building known for its lively atmosphere, where students often gathered in the common rooms to study, play ping pong, or watch movies on the communal TV. Maura greeted her father with a hug, her dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail, her green eyes bright with a mix of excitement and fatigue. She was dressed casually in a UMass sweatshirt and jeans, her running shoes a constant reminder of her love for the sport that had been a part of her life since high school. Fred noticed that she seemed a bit more reserved than usual, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, but he attributed it to the stress of her nursing program and the long hours she'd been putting in at her part-time job at the campus security desk. "How's my favorite nurse doing?" he asked, ruffling her hair as they walked to his car, a new Toyota Corolla he'd recently purchased. Maura laughed softly, replying, "I'm okay, Dad. Just tired. It's been a long week." Fred nodded, understanding the demands of her schedule, and suggested they spend the day looking for a new car to replace her 1996 Saturn sedan, a vehicle that had seen better days, with its failing engine, smoke-belching exhaust, and dashboard that rattled like a tin can on every drive. The Saturn had been a point of contention between Maura and Fred for months. He had bought the car for her when she started at UMass, a practical gift to help her get around campus and visit home on weekends, but it had become a source of frustration as its mechanical issues mounted. The car, a black four-door sedan with over 100,000 miles on the odometer, was notorious for its quirks. Sometimes it wouldn't start without a few minutes of coaxing, and other times it stalled at stoplights, leaving Maura stranded until it decided to cooperate. She often joked with her friends about its unreliability, calling it my junker. But the car's condition had become a real concern, especially as winter set in and the roads around Amherst grew icy. Fred, ever the practical father, wanted Maura to have a reliable vehicle, especially since she often drove to clinical placements at a hospital in nearby Springfield, a 30-minute commute that required a dependable car. "We need to get you something better," Fred told her as they pulled out of the dorm parking lot, heading toward a dealership on the outskirts of town. Maura agreed, though she felt a pang of guilt at the idea of her father spending more money on her, especially after the financial strain she'd been under since the credit card incident. They spent the afternoon test-driving cars at a Toyota dealership on Route 9, a busy stretch of road lined with strip malls, gas stations, and fast food joints. Maura sat in the driver's seat of a used 2001 Corolla, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she navigated the dealership's lot, while Fred watched from the passenger seat, offering advice on how to check the brakes and listen for engine noise. The car was in good condition, with low mileage and a clean interior, but Maura hesitated, unsure if she was ready to commit to a purchase. She test drove a Honda Civic next, a silver sedan with a manual transmission that reminded her of the car her sister Julie had driven in high school. The Civic felt sportier, and Maura liked the way it handled, but the price was slightly higher than Fred had hoped, and they decided to keep looking. They visited 2 more dealerships that afternoon, trying out a Ford Focus and a Nissan Sentra, but none of the cars felt quite right. Maura was meticulous, asking questions about gas mileage, maintenance history, and warranty options, her analytical mind on full display as she weighed the pros and cons of each vehicle. Fred admired her thoroughness, but he could sense her distraction, noticing the way she kept glancing at her phone, as if waiting for a message or call that never came. By late afternoon, they called it a day, deciding to hold off on a purchase until Maura had more time to think. Fred suggested they grab dinner at the Hangar Pub and Grill, a popular spot near campus known for its wings and casual atmosphere. The restaurant, located on University Drive, was a favorite among UMass students, with its walls decorated with aviation memorabilia and its menu featuring comfort food like burgers, fries, and mozzarella sticks. Maura and Fred settled into a booth near the window, the hum of conversation and the clink of glasses filling the air around them. They ordered a basket of buffalo wings to share, and Maura opted for a soda while Fred sipped a beer, his eyes scanning the room as he relaxed after a long day. Over dinner, they talked about Maura's classes, her clinical rotations, and her plans for the summer. She told Fred about a pediatric patient she'd met during her last shift at the hospital. A 6-year-old boy named Ethan who had been admitted with a broken arm after falling off a swing. He was so brave, Maura said, her face lighting up as she described how she'd helped distract Ethan by drawing pictures of superheroes with him while the doctor set his cast. Fred smiled, proud of his daughter's compassion, and said, "You're going to be an amazing nurse, Maura. I can already see it." The conversation turned to more personal matters as they finished their meal. Fred asked about Bill, Maura's boyfriend, who had graduated from West Point the previous year and was now stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Maura's expression darkened slightly, her fingers fidgeting with the straw in her soda. "Things are complicated," she admitted, her voice soft but tinged with frustration. She explained that the long-distance relationship was harder than she'd expected, with their schedules rarely aligning and the distance making it difficult to feel connected. Bill had been accused of infidelity by mutual friends, a rumor that had surfaced a few months earlier and led to several arguments between them. Maura had confronted Bill about it, but his denials felt hollow, and she wasn't sure if she could trust him. At the same time, Maura had grown close to her track coach at UMass, Hossein Baghdadi, a relationship that had sparked rumors of an affair among her teammates. While there was no evidence of infidelity on Maura's part, the rumors had reached Bill, adding another layer of tension to their already strained relationship. "I don't know what to do, Dad," Maura confessed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I love him, but I don't know if this is working anymore." Fred listened quietly, his heart aching for his daughter. He'd always liked Bill, a serious young man with a strong sense of duty, but he could see how the distance and the rumors were taking a toll on Maura. "You need to do what's best for you," he told her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "If it's not making you happy, maybe it's time to take a step back and figure out what you really want." Maura nodded, grateful for her father's advice, but the uncertainty lingered, a heavy weight on her shoulders. Fred then brought up the credit card incident, asking how she was handling the aftermath. Maura's face fell, and she admitted that she was still worried about the impact on her nursing career. The charge had been dismissed, but she feared that a background check might flag the incident, potentially barring her from getting her nursing license. "I messed up, Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to fix it." Fred reassured her, saying, "You'll get through this, Maura. You always do. Just focus on the future, not the past." His words were meant to comfort her, but Maura couldn't shake the guilt and anxiety that had been gnawing at her for months. After dinner, Fred dropped Maura back at her dorm, giving her $4,000 in cash to help with expenses, a generous gesture that reflected his unwavering support. He told her to use the money for whatever she needed, whether it was car repairs, textbooks, or a few nights out with friends to take her mind off things. Maura hugged him tightly, whispering, "Thanks, Dad. I love you," before heading inside. Fred drove to a nearby motel, the Hadley Inn on Route 9, where he planned to spend the night before heading back to Connecticut the next day. He later recalled that moment in a 2014 interview with the Boston Globe, his voice breaking as he said, "That was the last time I saw her. I keep thinking if I'd stayed longer, if I'd asked more questions, maybe things would have turned out differently." But at the time, Fred had no reason to suspect that anything was seriously wrong. He thought Maura was just going through a rough patch, the kind of challenges every college student faces at some point. That evening, Maura had plans to attend a party with friends, a chance to unwind after a stressful week. She asked Fred if she could borrow his Toyota Corolla to drive to the party, since her Saturn was in such poor condition, and Fred agreed, handing her the keys with a playful warning to be careful. Maura smiled, promising to take good care of the car, and drove to her friend Kate Markopoulos's dorm in the Orchard Hill residential area, a quieter part of campus known for its tree-lined paths and smaller, more intimate dorm buildings. Kate, a fellow nursing student, had been Maura's best friend since their freshman year, and the two shared a bond built on late-night study sessions, long runs around campus, and countless conversations about their dreams and fears. Kate had invited Maura to a small gathering in her dorm room, a casual party with a handful of friends from their nursing program. The group planned to drink, play card games, and listen to music, a typical college Saturday night meant to blow off steam before the grind of classes resumed on Monday. The party started around 9 p.m., with about 8 people crowded into Kate's dorm room, a cozy space decorated with fairy lights, posters of bands like Coldplay and U2, and a beanbag chair in the corner where Maura often sat during their study sessions. The group drank cheap wine and beer, passing around a bottle of vodka for shots as they played a drinking game called Kings, where each card drawn from a deck prompted a different rule or challenge. Maura joined in, laughing as her friend Mike accidentally spilled beer on his shirt during a round of Never Have I Ever, and singing along to U2's With or Without You when it came on the stereo. To her friends, she seemed in good spirits, her earlier conversation with Fred about her relationship woes, and the credit card incident tucked away behind her usual warmth and humor. But Kate noticed a subtle change in Maura's demeanor as the night wore on. Her laughter seemed forced at times, and she kept checking her phone, as if waiting for a message that never came. She was quieter than usual. Kate later told the Oxygen documentary team in 2017, "I thought maybe she was just tired, but looking back, I wonder if something was really bothering her." Around 1 a.m. on February 8th, Maura decided to head back to Fred's motel to return his car. She had been drinking but didn't appear visibly intoxicated to her friends, who later recalled that she seemed steady on her feet and coherent in her speech. Maura said goodbye to Kate with a hug, promising to text her the next day, and drove off in the Toyota Corolla, the streets of Amherst quiet and slick with a light dusting of snow. The drive to the Hadley Inn was short, just a few miles along Route 9, a road she knew well from her frequent trips to local shops and restaurants. But at 2:30 a.m., disaster struck. As Maura approached a sharp curve near the intersection of Route 9 and Belchertown Road, she lost control of the car, veering off the road and crashing into a guardrail. The impact crumpled the front bumper and shattered the windshield, causing nearly $10,000 in damage to Fred's new car. Maura wasn't injured, the airbags didn't deploy, and she was wearing her seatbelt. But the accident left her shaken, her hands trembling as she stepped out of the car to assess the damage. A passing motorist called 911, and Amherst police arrived at the scene within minutes, finding Maura standing by the wrecked car, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. The officer, Officer John Smith, noted in his report that Maura appeared upset but cooperative, and he asked if she'd been drinking. Maura admitted to having a few drinks at the party, but insisted she felt fine to drive, a claim the officer took with skepticism given the crash. However, no breathalyzer test was administered, a decision that would later be criticized by Maura's family as a missed opportunity to assess her state of mind that night. Officer Smith called for a tow truck to remove the car from the road, and Maura, realizing she needed to tell her father, called Fred at the motel, her voice quivering as she explained what had happened. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I crashed your car. I don't know what happened. I just lost control." Fred, groggy from being woken up, but immediately concerned, told her to stay where she was, and that he'd come pick her up. Fred arrived at the scene around 3 a.m., his heart sinking as he saw the damaged Corolla being loaded onto a tow truck. He hugged Maura tightly, relieved that she wasn't hurt, but his frustration was evident as he surveyed the wreckage. "What were you thinking, Maura?" he asked, his tone a mix of worry and exasperation. Maura apologized again, tears streaming down her face as she explained that she'd only had a couple of drinks and thought she was okay to drive. Fred didn't press charges, deciding to handle the matter privately rather than involve the police further. But the incident added a new layer of stress to Maura's already fragile state. The officer allowed Maura to leave with her father, and Fred drove her back to her dorm, the silence between them heavy with unspoken emotions. Once they arrived at Kennedy Tower, Fred walked Maura to her room, making sure she was settled before heading back to the motel. "Get some rest," he told her, his voice softening. "We'll figure this out tomorrow." Maura nodded, but as she closed the door behind her, the weight of the night crashed down on her, her mind racing with guilt and fear about the consequences of her mistake. Later that morning, around 9 a.m., Maura called Bill Roche in Oklahoma, her voice still shaky as she recounted the accident. Bill, who was stationed at Fort Sill as a second lieutenant in the Army, listened quietly as Maura explained what had happened, her words punctuated by soft sobs. "I messed up, Bill," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do. Dad's car is totaled, and I feel awful." Bill tried to comfort her, saying, "It's okay, Maura. Accidents happen. Your dad will understand, and we'll figure out how to pay for the damage. Just take care of yourself, okay?" Maura thanked him, but the call left her feeling more isolated than ever, the distance between them a stark reminder of the challenges in their relationship. She spent the rest of the morning in her dorm room, staring out the window at the snow-covered campus, her thoughts a tangled mess of worry and regret. She knew the crash would likely increase her insurance rates, adding to her financial strain, and she feared her father's disappointment, despite his reassurances. The incident also brought her recent legal trouble back to the forefront of her mind. She was still on probation for the credit card fraud charge, and any further missteps could jeopardize the dismissal of the case, potentially derailing her nursing career. The emotional toll of the crash carried over into Sunday, February 8th, a day that would bring another unsettling incident that further highlighted Maura's fragile state. Maura had a scheduled shift at the campus security desk in Melville Hall, a job she'd held since her sophomore year to help cover her expenses. The security desk, located in the lobby of the dorm, was a quiet post where students checked in guests, monitored security cameras, and handled minor emergencies like lockouts or noise complaints. Maura arrived for her shift at 10 p.m., dressed in her usual work attire, a UMass polo shirt, jeans, and sneakers, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her supervisor, Karen Mayat, noticed that Maura seemed distracted, her eyes darting to her phone every few minutes as if expecting a call. "Everything okay?" Karen asked, her tone gentle but concerned. Maura forced a smile, replying, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a rough night." Karen nodded, sensing that Maura didn't want to talk, and returned to her paperwork, leaving Maura to her duties. At 1 a.m. on February 9th, while Maura was sitting at the desk, her phone rang, the sound cutting through the quiet hum of the dorm lobby. She answered it quickly, her voice low as she spoke to the caller, but within moments, her demeanor changed dramatically. Karen, who was sitting a few feet away, later described the moment in a 2004 police interview, saying, "Maura's face went pale, and she just froze like she'd heard something that completely shattered her." Maura hung up the phone after a brief conversation, her hands trembling as she set it down on the desk. She stared blankly at the wall, her eyes unfocused, her breathing shallow. Karen, alarmed by Maura's reaction, approached her and asked, "Maura, what's wrong? Who is that?" But Maura didn't respond. She seemed to be in a daze, her body rigid, her mind elsewhere. Karen described Maura's state as quasi-catatonic, a term that would later be debated by those trying to understand Maura's mental health in the days before her disappearance. After several minutes of trying to get through to her, Karen decided Maura was in no condition to continue working and offered to walk her back to her dorm. The walk from Melville Hall to Kennedy Tower was short, just a 5-minute trek across campus. But the night was bitterly cold, with a sharp wind cutting through the air and a light snow falling, blanketing the ground in a fresh layer of white. Karen held Maura's arm as they walked, guiding her through the darkness, the only sound the crunch of their footsteps in the snow. Maura remained silent, her gaze fixed on the ground, her body trembling not just from the cold, but from whatever had shaken her so deeply. When they reached Maura's room, Karen helped her inside, making sure she was settled before leaving. "If you need to talk, I'm here," Karen said, her voice soft with concern. Maura nodded faintly, but she didn't speak, closing the door behind Karen as she retreated into her room. Karen later told police that she had no idea who had called Maura or what was said, but the impact was undeniable. Maura was visibly distraught, her usual composure replaced by a haunting stillness that left Karen worried for her well-being. The identity of the caller and the content of the conversation remain one of the most perplexing mysteries of Maura's case. Maura's phone records, which were later reviewed by investigators, showed that the call came from a blocked number, making it impossible to trace without further cooperation from the phone company, which was not forthcoming. Maura never revealed to anyone what had upset her, and the lack of information has fueled endless speculation. Some theorized that the call was from Bill, perhaps delivering bad news about their relationship or confronting her about the rumors of her closeness with Hossein Baghdadi. Others suggested it might have been related to her credit card fraud case, perhaps a reminder of her probation status or a threat that heightened her anxiety. Julie Murray, Maura's sister, offered her own perspective in a 2024 episode of her podcast Media Pressure, The Untold Story of Maura Murray. In episode 5, Julie speculated that the call could have been from a family member, possibly their sister Kathleen, who had struggled with alcoholism and was in a tumultuous relationship at the time. Kathleen was going through a lot back then, Julie said, her voice heavy with emotion. It's possible she called Maura in distress, and Maura, being the caretaker she always was, felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of helping her. The phone call marked a turning point in Maura's weekend, amplifying the stress she was already under from the car accident and her ongoing personal struggles. After Karen left, Maura sat on her bed, the room dimly lit by a small desk lamp, her mind racing as she tried to process the events of the past 24 hours. Her dorm room, a small single with a twin bed, a wooden desk, and a closet stuffed with running gear and nursing textbooks, felt both comforting and suffocating. The walls were decorated with photos of her family, snapshots from their camping trips in the White Mountains, a picture of her and Julie at a high school track meet, a candid shot of her and Bill laughing at a West Point football game. These images, once a source of joy, now seemed to mock her, reminders of a life that felt increasingly out of reach. Maura's journal, which she kept in a drawer by her bed, contained entries from the past few months that hinted at her inner turmoil. In a January 2004 entry, she wrote, "I feel like I'm drowning sometimes. School, Bill, the credit card thing, it's all too much. I just want to run away and start over." The entry, later discovered by investigators, offered a glimpse into the mental health struggles Maura was facing, struggles she kept hidden from even her closest friends and family. By the time the sun rose on Monday, February 9th, Maura was in a fragile state, her emotions raw from the weekend's events. She woke early, her eyes heavy with exhaustion after a restless night, and sat at her desk, staring at her laptop. At 3:32 a.m., just hours after the phone call, she submitted a nursing homework assignment electronically, an action that would later be cited by her family as evidence that she intended to return to her normal routine. The assignment, a case study on pediatric care, was meticulously completed, with detailed notes on patient assessment and treatment plans, a testament to Maura's dedication to her studies, even in the midst of personal chaos. But as the morning progressed, Maura's actions took a turn that suggested she was planning something more significant than a typical Monday. She began by searching online for directions to Burlington, Vermont, and the Berkshires in Massachusetts, two areas known for their scenic beauty and recreational opportunities. The searches, conducted between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., indicated that Maura was considering a trip, though she didn't share her plans with anyone. Not her friends, her family, or even Bill. Around 1 p.m., Maura sent an email to Bill, her words a mix of affection and detachment that reflected the uncertainty she felt about their relationship. "I love you more, stud," she wrote, using a nickname she often used for him. "I got your messages, but honestly I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promised to call today though. Love you, Maura." The email, later retrieved by investigators, was the last known communication between Maura and Bill before her disappearance, and its tone suggested she was pulling away, perhaps needing space to sort through her feelings. At 1:24 p.m., Maura called the owner of a condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire, a place her family had vacationed in the past, filled with memories of skiing, hiking, and cozy nights by the fireplace. The condo, part of a resort called the Village at Loon Mountain, was a place Maura associated with happier times, and she inquired about availability for the week, though she didn't make a reservation. The call, which lasted about 5 minutes, was another clue that Maura was planning a getaway, though her destination and purpose remained unclear. Maura then turned her attention to tying up loose ends at UMass. She emailed her professors and work supervisor, claiming she needed to take a week off due to a death in the family. A lie, as her family later confirmed there had been no such death. The emails, sent between 1:30 p.m. and 2 p.m., were brief but polite, with Maura explaining that she would be away for a few days and would catch up on her assignments when she returned. "I'll be in touch soon," she wrote to her nursing professor, Dr. Linda Harris, her tone professional but distant. To her supervisor at the security desk, she wrote, "I need to take some personal time. I'll be back next week." The lie about a family death was a red flag to those who knew Maura well. She was not one to fabricate stories, and the deception suggested she was desperate to leave without raising suspicion. Her family later speculated that Maura might have used the excuse because she didn't want to explain her true reasons for leaving, reasons that may have been tied to her mental health and the overwhelming pressure she was under. By 3:15 p.m., Maura was preparing to leave Amherst. She withdrew $280 from an ATM in the campus center, a bustling hub where students gathered to eat, study, and socialize, nearly emptying her bank account. She then walked to a nearby liquor store, Campus Spirits, and spent $40 on alcohol, purchasing a box of Franzia red wine, Bailey's Irish cream, Kahlua, and a bottle of vodka. The purchase, captured on the store's security footage, showed Maura standing at the counter, her expression blank as she paid with cash, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The alcohol, later found in her car, raised questions about her intentions. Some speculated she planned to drink alone, perhaps to numb the pain of her recent struggles, while others believed she might have been planning to meet someone, the liquor intended for a social gathering. Maura returned to her dorm and packed a bag with clothes, toiletries, makeup, workout gear, college textbooks, and a copy of Not Without Peril, a book about hiking dangers in the White Mountains that she'd been reading for a class assignment. The inclusion of the book, with its ominous title, would later be seen as a haunting foreshadowing of her disappearance in the same region. At 3:40 p.m., Maura left her dorm, her packed bag in the backseat of her Saturn, and drove north out of Amherst, the campus fading in her rearview mirror as she headed toward Interstate 91. Her destination was unknown, her intentions unclear, but the events of the weekend, the car accident, the distressing phone call, and her decision to lie about a family death, painted a picture of a young woman in crisis, seeking an escape from the mounting pressures of her life. Maura's journey to New Hampshire was the culmination of a troubled weekend, a weekend that revealed the depth of her struggles and set the stage for the mystery that would unfold on that snowy road in Haverhill. As she drove, the weight of her emotions likely sat heavy on her shoulders, a silent burden that would lead her to a moment that changed everything, a moment that would leave her family, friends, and the nation searching for answers for over 2 decades. On the evening of February 9, 2004, Maura Murray's life took a fateful turn on a desolate stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, a rural road winding through the White Mountains. The day had begun with Maura's abrupt departure from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a decision marked by a series of actions that suggested she was seeking an escape from the mounting pressures in her life. After a troubled weekend, crashing her father's car, receiving a distressing phone call, and lying to her professors about a family death, Maura had packed a bag, withdrawn nearly all her money, purchased alcohol, and driven north in her battered 1996 Saturn sedan. By 7 p.m., she was navigating the snowy curves of Route 112, a two-lane road flanked by dense woods and towering snowbanks, when her car skidded off the pavement and came to rest in a snowbank, facing the wrong direction. That minor crash in the frigid darkness of a New Hampshire winter would become the last known moment of Maura's life, launching a mystery that has captivated the nation for over 2 decades. Route 112, also known as the Kankamagus Highway in parts, is a scenic byway that stretches through the heart of the White Mountains, a region known for its rugged beauty and harsh winters. In February, the area is often blanketed in snow, with temperatures regularly dipping below zero, and the road can be treacherous, especially for a driver unfamiliar with its sharp turns and icy patches. Maura had driven about 140 miles from Amherst, a journey that took her through western Massachusetts, across the Vermont border briefly, and into New Hampshire, where she entered the town of Haverhill, a small community of about 4,700 people near the village of Woodsville. The area around the crash site was remote, with few homes scattered along the road, their lights barely visible through the thick forest. The nearest town, Woodsville, was a few miles west, offering basic amenities like a gas station, a diner, and a small grocery store. But on that Monday night, the road was quiet, the silence broken only by the occasional passing car and the whisper of wind through the pines. Maura's Saturn, already in poor condition with its failing engine and smoke-belching exhaust, was ill-equipped for the journey. The car had been a source of frustration for months, often stalling or refusing to start, and Maura had been relying on it despite its unreliability because she couldn't afford a replacement. As she approached a sharp corner near the intersection of Route 112 and Bradley Hill Road, the Saturn hit a patch of ice, causing it to skid off the eastbound lane and into a snowbank on the right side of the road. The impact was minor. Later reports from the New Hampshire State Police determined that the crash occurred at a low speed, likely under 20 miles per hour, and Maura was almost certainly uninjured. The car came to rest with its front end lodged in the snowbank, its rear end protruding onto the road, facing westbound against the flow of traffic. The headlights were still on, casting a faint glow across the snow, and the engine sputtered to a stop, leaving Maura in the eerie stillness of the winter night. At 7:27 p.m., Faith Westman, a resident of a house about 100 yards from the crash site, noticed the car from her kitchen window. Faith, a retired nurse in her late 50s, lived with her husband, Tim, in a modest home set back from the road, its front porch offering a clear view of Route 112. She saw the Saturn in the snowbank, its headlights illuminating the darkness, and noticed a figure standing outside the driver's side door, appearing to assess the situation. Faith later told police that the person, presumably Maura, seemed shaken but not visibly injured, moving around the car as if checking for damage. Concerned, Faith called 911 to report the accident, her voice calm but urgent as she described the scene to the dispatcher. "There's a car off the road near my house," she said, according to the 911 transcript later released to the public. "It looks like a single occupant, a young woman, I think. She's standing outside the car, but I can't tell if she's hurt." The dispatcher assured Faith that police were on their way and asked her to keep an eye on the situation until help arrived. Moments after Faith's call, Bruce Atwood, a school bus driver who lived across the street from the Westmans, pulled up to the scene in his bus, having just finished his evening route. Bruce, a heavy-set man in his early 60s with a gruff demeanor, noticed the Saturn in the snowbank and stopped to check on the driver. He approached Maura, who was still standing by her car, her dark jacket and jeans offering little protection against the biting cold, which had dropped to around 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Maura was shivering, her arms wrapped around herself, her breath visible in the frigid air. Bruce rolled down his window and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" Maura looked up, her face pale in the glow of the headlights, and replied, "I'm fine, thank you. I've already called AAA." Her voice was steady but strained, as if she were trying to maintain composure despite the situation. Bruce, skeptical of her claims since cell phone reception in the area was notoriously spotty, offered to call the police for her, but Maura quickly shook her head, saying, "No, please don't. I'm okay, really." Her insistence on avoiding police involvement struck Bruce as odd, but he respected her wishes, telling her he'd be at his house, just 100 yards away, if she changed her mind. Bruce drove home, parked his bus, and immediately called 911 at 7:29 p.m., reporting the crash and his interaction with Maura. In his call, later documented in police reports, he noted that the young woman seemed shaken up, but not visibly injured, with no signs of blood or distress beyond her shivering. He mentioned her claim about calling AAA, adding, "I don't know if that's true. She didn't seem to be on the phone when I saw her." Bruce's call, combined with Faith Westman's, prompted a quick response from the Haverhill Police Department, which dispatched Officer Cecil Smith to the scene. Smith, a veteran officer with 15 years on the force, was on patrol in Woodsville when he received the call, and he estimated it would take him about 15 minutes to reach the crash site, given the distance and the icy conditions of the roads. In the meantime, Faith and Tim Westman continued to watch from their window, noting that Maura appeared to be moving around her car, possibly gathering her belongings or trying to free the vehicle from the snowbank. At one point, Faith saw Maura open the trunk, though she couldn't tell what she was doing, the distance and darkness obscuring her view. By 7:46 p.m., Officer Smith arrived at the scene, his cruiser's lights flashing as he pulled up to the Saturn. But Maura was gone. The car was locked, its headlights off, and the surrounding area was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of Smith's boots in the snow as he approached the vehicle. He used his flashlight to inspect the scene, noting the minor damage to the front end of the Saturn, consistent with a low-speed impact, and the position of the car in the snowbank, which suggested it had skidded off the road rather than been forced off. Inside the car, visible through the windows, were several items that would later become key pieces of evidence. A box of Franzia red wine behind the driver's seat, some of the wine spilled on the ceiling and door, indicating it had been opened. A Coke bottle with a red liquid inside, possibly wine, on the passenger seat, and personal belongings like Maura's gloves, a U2 cassette, a pair of sweatpants, a bottle of shampoo, and a travel toothbrush. Notably absent were Maura's wallet, cell phone, and black backpack, items she was believed to have taken with her, suggesting she had left the scene intentionally rather than being forcibly removed. Smith called for backup, and within minutes, a tow truck arrived to remove the Saturn from the snowbank, while Smith began a preliminary search of the area. He walked along the road, shining his flashlight into the woods on either side, looking for footprints or signs of a struggle, but the snow was undisturbed, with no tracks leading away from the car into the forest. The lack of footprints was a critical detail. It suggested that Maura had not wandered into the woods, a theory that would later be proposed by some investigators who believed she might have succumbed to the elements. Instead, the absence of tracks indicated she had stayed on the road, either walking away or, more likely, getting into another vehicle. A tracking dog, brought in the next day by the New Hampshire State Police, would confirm this hypothesis, following Maura's scent for about 100 yards east of the crash site, near the intersection with Bradley Hill Road, before losing the trail. The dog's handler noted that the scent ended abruptly, a sign that Maura had likely entered a car, either willingly or under duress. Local residents in the area provided additional context that night, though their accounts raised more questions than answers. Steve Loud, a neighbor who lived a quarter-mile east of the crash site, drove past the scene shortly after 7:30 p.m. and later told Murr, in a 2004 interview, that he saw no one near the car, nor did he notice any footprints in the snow leading into the woods. His observation supported the theory that Maura had left the scene quickly, within the 19-minute window between Faith Westman's 911 call and Officer Smith's arrival. Another neighbor, John Merritt, who lived closer to the crash site, told police he saw a young woman walking east along Route 112 around 7:35 p.m., wearing a dark jacket and carrying a backpack, a description that matched Maura. Merritt's sighting was significant. It placed Maura on the road, moving away from her car in the minutes before police arrived, but he didn't see her enter a vehicle or interact with anyone, leaving her ultimate fate unclear. Inside the Saturn, Officer Smith found items that offered a snapshot of Maura's life and hinted at her plans. The alcohol she had purchased earlier that day, a box of wine, Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, and vodka, was a point of interest, with the spilled wine suggesting she might have been drinking before or during the drive, though no definitive evidence confirmed this. The presence of her textbooks, including Not Without Peril, a book about hiking dangers in the White Mountains, added a layer of intrigue. Some speculated that Maura might have been planning a hike, though her attire and the weather made this unlikely. Her workout gear and toiletries indicated she intended to stay somewhere overnight, possibly at the condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire, she had called about earlier that day. But the absence of her wallet, phone, and backpack suggested she had taken her most essential belongings with her, a sign that she didn't plan to abandon her car permanently. The crash site itself became a focal point for the mystery that would unfold. The area around Route 112 and Bradley Hill Road was remote, with limited traffic on a Monday night, especially in winter. The road was poorly lit, with no streetlights for miles, and the dense forest on either side offered countless places to hide or be hidden. The snowbanks, piled high from recent plows, made it difficult to walk off the road without leaving deep footprints, further supporting the theory that Maura had stayed on the pavement. The weather that night was brutal, with a wind chill that made it feel even colder than the 5-degree temperature, and Maura, dressed only in a jacket and jeans with no hat or gloves, would have been at risk of hypothermia if she had stayed outside for long. The short window of time, less than 19 minutes, between her last sighting and the police's arrival added to the enigma. Where could she have gone in such a brief period, in such harsh conditions, without leaving a trace? Officer Smith's initial assessment, documented in his report, classified the incident as a single-vehicle accident with no signs of foul play. He noted the absence of blood, the locked car, and the lack of footprints, concluding that the driver had likely left the scene voluntarily, perhaps accepting a ride from a passing motorist. But as he radioed back to dispatch, requesting a records check on the car's registration, which came back to Maura Murray of Hampshire, Massachusetts, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The young woman's refusal to involve police, as reported by Bruce Atwood, and her sudden disappearance raised red flags, though Smith had no way of knowing the full scope of the mystery that would soon unfold. He secured the scene, arranging for the Saturn to be towed to a local garage, Lavoie's Auto Body, where it would be held until its owner could be located. As he drove back to the station, the snow continued to fall, covering the road in a fresh layer of white, erasing any lingering signs of the crash, and of Maura herself. That night, as the clock ticked past 8 p.m., Maura's family and friends were still unaware of the events unfolding in Haverhill. Back in Amherst, her roommate, Emily Carter, assumed Maura was spending the night with friends, as she often did after a long weekend. In Oklahoma, Bill Roche was waiting for the phone call Maura had promised in her email, unaware that she was no longer in a position to make it. And in Connecticut, Fred Murray was settling in for the evening, his thoughts on the $10,000 damage to his car, but his heart at ease knowing Maura was safe, or so he thought. The crash on Route 112 was just the beginning, a moment frozen in time on a snowy New Hampshire road, where a young woman vanished into the night, leaving behind a car, a few scattered belongings, and a mystery that would haunt those who loved her for years to come. The disappearance of Maura Murray on the night of February 9, 2004, triggered an immediate response from law enforcement in Haverhill, New Hampshire. But the initial search efforts would prove frustratingly inconclusive, setting the tone for a mystery that remains unsolved over 2 decades later. After Officer Cecil Smith arrived at the crash site on Route 112 at 7:46 p.m. and found Maura's black 1996 Saturn sedan abandoned, with no sign of the young woman, the Haverhill Police Department launched a search that night, hoping to find her quickly. The scene was eerie, the car locked, a box of red wine spilled inside, personal items like gloves and a U2 cassette scattered about, and no footprints in the snow leading into the surrounding woods. Maura's wallet, cell phone, and black backpack were missing, suggesting she had taken them with her. But where she had gone in the 19 minutes between her last sighting and the police's arrival was a question that would haunt investigators, her family, and the public for years to come. That night, Officer Smith and a small team of Haverhill police officers began searching the immediate area around the crash site, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they scanned the snow-covered ground for any sign of Maura. The temperature had dropped to around 5 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill making it feel even colder, and the officers knew that if Maura was out in the elements, dressed only in a jacket and jeans as described by witness Bruce Atwood, she would be at risk of hypothermia within hours. They walked along Route 112, checking both sides of the road for footprints, and ventured a short distance into the woods, calling Maura's name into the frigid night. The forest was dense, with towering pines and thick underbrush blanketed in snow, making it difficult to navigate even with flashlights. After an hour of searching, they found nothing. No tracks, no dropped items, no indication that Maura had left the road on foot. The absence of footprints was a critical detail, as it suggested she had either walked along the pavement or, more likely, gotten into a vehicle, a theory supported by the lack of any signs of a struggle at the scene. On the morning of February 10th, the search escalated as the New Hampshire State Police and the Fish and Game Department joined the effort, bringing additional resources to bear. A command post was set up at the Haverhill Police Department, a small brick building in Woodsville, where officers coordinated the search and began piecing together what little information they had. The state police deployed a helicopter to conduct an aerial search, its blades slicing through the cold morning air as it flew low over the White Mountains, scanning the forest for any sign of Maura. The helicopter was equipped with thermal imaging, which could detect body heat even through dense tree cover, but the sub-zero temperatures and Maura's likely exposure to the elements made it unlikely that the technology would pick up her signature if she had been outside for long. On the ground, Fish and Game officers, trained in wilderness search and rescue, led teams of volunteers through the woods within a 1-mile radius of the crash site, their breath visible in the icy air as they called out for Maura and searched for clues. They focused on areas near the intersection of Route 112 and Bradley Hill Road, where a tracking dog had lost Maura's scent the previous night, indicating she may have entered a vehicle at that point. The tracking dog, a German shepherd named Max brought in by the state police, had followed Maura's scent for about 100 yards east of the crash site before losing the trail, a detail that became a cornerstone of the early investigation. The dog's handler, Sergeant Mark Ober, noted in his report that the abrupt end to the scent trail was consistent with someone getting into a car, as the vehicle would have carried the person, and their scent away from the area. This finding shifted the focus of the search away from the woods and toward the possibility that Maura had left the scene with someone, either willingly or under duress. However, the lack of witnesses to confirm this theory, no one reported seeing Maura get into a car, left investigators with more questions than answers. The search teams also looked for Maura's black backpack, which she was believed to have taken with her, hoping it might have been dropped or discarded, but the snow-covered landscape yielded nothing, the white expanse stretching endlessly in every direction. Maura's family was notified of her disappearance on the morning of February 10th, a call that shattered their world. Fred Murray, Maura's father, was at his home in Connecticut when he received the call from the Haverhill Police Department around 9 a.m. The officer on the line, Lieutenant John Healy, explained that Maura's car had been found abandoned on Route 112, with no sign of her at the scene, and asked if Fred knew where she might have been headed. Fred was stunned, his mind racing as he tried to process the news. "She was supposed to be at school," he told Healy, his voice tight with worry. "She didn't tell me she was going to New Hampshire. Something's wrong. She wouldn't just leave like this." Fred immediately called Maura's siblings, starting with Julie, who was stationed with the Army in Virginia. Julie, 3 years older than Maura and her closest confidant, was equally shocked, recalling their last conversation a week earlier when Maura had seemed stressed, but not to the point of running off. She was talking about her nursing classes, Julie later said in a 2024 episode of her podcast Media Pressure. "She sounded tired, but I didn't think she was in crisis. I wish I'd asked more questions." Fred drove to Haverhill that day, arriving late on February 10th after a tense 4-hour journey, his mind replaying every moment of his last visit with Maura just 2 days earlier. He had given her $4,000 in cash to help with expenses, and they had spent the day looking for a new car, a memory that now felt like a cruel irony given that her Saturn was now at the center of a missing persons case. When Fred arrived at the Haverhill Police Department, he was a man on the edge, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a frantic urgency. "She's my daughter," he told Lieutenant Healy, his voice breaking as he stood in the small, cluttered command post, maps and notes pinned to a bulletin board behind him. "She's not suicidal. She wouldn't run off. Someone took her, I know it." Fred's insistence that Maura had been abducted clashed with the police's initial theory that she might have wandered into the woods and succumbed to the elements, a hypothesis the family rejected outright. Maura was an experienced hiker, familiar with the White Mountains from years of family camping trips, and the lack of footprints in the snow made it clear she hadn't left the road on foot. On February 11th, the search continued, with volunteers joining the effort alongside law enforcement. Maura's boyfriend, Bill Roche, flew from Oklahoma to New Hampshire, arriving in Haverhill that afternoon after a red-eye flight filled with worry. Bill, a second lieutenant stationed at Fort Sill, had received Maura's email on February 9th, where she promised to call him later that day, a call that never came. When he learned of her disappearance, he immediately requested leave from the Army and booked the first flight he could find, his mind racing with fear for Maura's safety. At the Haverhill Police Department, Bill was interviewed by investigators, who asked about Maura's state of mind and their relationship. He denied any involvement in her disappearance, and his alibi, being in Oklahoma on February 9th, was quickly confirmed by military records. Bill shared Maura's last email with police, reading aloud her words. "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promised to call today, though. Love you, Maura." The email, with its mix of affection and withdrawal, hinted at Maura's emotional state, suggesting she was pulling away, perhaps overwhelmed by the pressures in her life. The search efforts over the next few days were exhaustive but fruitless. Volunteers, including Maura's family, friends, and local residents, combed the area around Route 112, walking through snow up to their knees, their voices echoing through the woods as they called Maura's name. They searched along the road, in ditches, and in nearby fields, hoping to find any sign of her. A dropped glove, a piece of clothing, the black backpack she was believed to have taken with her. The New Hampshire Fish and Game Department deployed additional canine units, but the dogs found no new scent trails, reinforcing the theory that Maura had left the area in a vehicle. A second aerial search on February 12th, using a state police helicopter, scanned a wider radius, but the dense forest and deep snow made it nearly impossible to spot anything from the air. By February 13th, the official search was scaled back, with authorities citing the lack of leads and the harsh weather conditions as reasons to pause the ground efforts, though they assured the family they would continue investigating. Fred Murray was relentless, refusing to accept the police's theory that Maura might have succumbed to the elements. He organized his own searches, rallying friends and family to join him in Haverhill, where they stayed at a local motel and spent days scouring the area. Fred's frustration with law enforcement grew as he felt they weren't doing enough, a sentiment he expressed in a heated meeting with Lieutenant Healy on February 14th. "You're not taking this seriously," Fred accused, his voice rising as he stood in the police station, his hands clenched into fists. "My daughter is out there, and you're acting like she just walked away. She didn't, she was taken." Healy tried to reassure him, explaining that they were following every lead, but the lack of evidence, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, made it difficult to determine what had happened. The police also interviewed Maura's friends and roommates at UMass, hoping to uncover more about her plans, but no one knew she had been heading to New Hampshire, and her lie about a family death only deepened the mystery. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation shifted focus. Early on, police speculated that Maura might have been suicidal, pointing to the alcohol in her car and her lie about a family death as signs of distress. They noted that she had been drinking before the crash, as evidenced by the spilled wine, and suggested she might have wandered into the woods in a disoriented state, succumbing to hypothermia. But her family, particularly Fred and Julie, strongly disputed this theory, insisting Maura was in good spirits and had plans for the future. They pointed to her submission of a nursing homework assignment at 3:32 a.m. on February 9th as evidence that she intended to return to UMass, arguing that a suicidal person wouldn't bother with schoolwork hours before disappearing. Maura loved life, Julie told the Boston Globe in a 2004 interview, her voice firm with conviction. She had dreams. She wanted to be a nurse to help people. She wasn't going to throw that away. By the end of February 2004, the search had gone cold, with no new leads to pursue. Maura's disappearance was classified as a suspicious missing persons case by the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, a designation that acknowledged the unusual circumstances but offered little comfort to her family. Fred continued to drive to Haverhill every weekend, walking the stretch of Route 112 where Maura's car was found, his eyes scanning the woods for any sign of his daughter. The lack of answers weighed heavily on him, his grief compounded by the uncertainty of not knowing whether Maura was alive or dead. For Maura's loved ones, the search was just beginning, a search that would stretch across years, fueled by hope, frustration, and an unyielding determination to find the truth. Maura Murray's disappearance on February 9, 2004, began as a single moment on a snowy road in Haverhill, New Hampshire, but it grew into a mystery that spanned over 2 decades, leaving an indelible mark on her family, her community, and the nation. The 21-year-old nursing student vanished after crashing her black 1996 Saturn sedan on Route 112. Her car found abandoned with a box of spilled red wine, personal items like gloves and a U2 cassette, and no trace of Maura herself. The investigation that followed explored every possibility: foul play, a voluntary disappearance, an accidental death in the wilderness. But the lack of evidence left the case unresolved, a haunting question mark that lingered into 2025. As the search for Maura came to a close, her family found a form of peace not in answers, but in the legacy she left behind, a legacy that speaks to the challenges of missing persons cases, the fragility of mental health, and the enduring power of love in the face of loss. This final chapter brings Maura's story to its conclusion, reflecting on the investigation's end, the theories that shaped it, the family's journey toward acceptance, and the lasting impact of a young woman who vanished into the snow. The investigation into Maura's disappearance began with urgency on the night of February 9, 2004, when Haverhill Police Officer Cecil Smith arrived at the crash site at 7:46 p.m., just 19 minutes after the first 911 call, to find Maura gone. The initial search that night, conducted by local police, found no footprints in the snow leading into the woods, a critical detail that suggested Maura had not wandered off on foot. The next day, the New Hampshire State Police and Fish and Game Department joined the effort, deploying a helicopter with thermal imaging and ground teams with tracking dogs. One dog, a German shepherd named Max, followed Maura's scent for 100 yards east of the crash site, near the intersection with Bradley Hill Road, before losing the trail, indicating she likely entered a vehicle. This finding shifted the investigation's focus away from the woods and toward the possibility that Maura had left with someone, either willingly or under duress. But with no witnesses to confirm this, the trail went cold quickly. Over the months that followed, the investigation pursued several leads, each one raising hope only to end in disappointment. In November 2004, a man approached Fred Murray, Maura's father, with a rusty, stained knife that belonged to his brother, a local resident with a criminal history who lived near the crash site. The man claimed his brother had acted suspiciously after Maura's disappearance, making cryptic comments about a girl in the woods. Fred, desperate for any clue, turned the knife over to the Haverhill police, who sent it to the New Hampshire State Crime Lab for testing. The results were a blow. The stains were rust and organic material, with no human DNA, and the lead fizzled out, leaving Fred with a renewed sense of frustration. Other potential evidence, like a sample of carpet from the same man's former residence tested in 2008, also yielded nothing conclusive, with the results never publicly disclosed, further fueling Fred's distrust of law enforcement. Theories about Maura's fate multiplied as the investigation stalled. Early on, police speculated that Maura might have fled to avoid her recent troubles. The credit card fraud charge from November 2003, the $10,000 damage to her father's car 2 days before her disappearance, and the emotional distress evident in her actions, such as lying to her professors about a family death. The alcohol in her car, a box of Franzia red wine, some spilled on the ceiling, along with Bailey's Irish cream, Kahlua, and vodka, suggested she might have been drinking, possibly to cope with her stress, and some investigators believed she left the scene to escape the consequences of a potential DUI. A February 2004 press release from the New Hampshire State Police stated, "We believe Maura may have accepted a ride to continue to an unknown destination," a theory that aligned with her packed bag, which included clothes, toiletries, and textbooks, and her online searches for directions to Burlington, Vermont, and the Berkshires. Yet, her family rejected this idea, insisting Maura had no reason to run away permanently. She loved her life. Fred told the Boston Globe in 2004, his voice firm. She was going to be a nurse. She wouldn't walk away from that. Another theory posited that Maura had succumbed to the elements, a possibility that seemed plausible given the harsh winter conditions on the night she vanished. With temperatures at 5 degrees Fahrenheit and a biting wind chill, Maura, dressed only in a jacket and jeans, would have been at risk of hypothermia within hours if she had wandered into the woods. Some suggested she might have been disoriented, possibly due to alcohol, or the emotional distress from a phone call that left her quasi-catatonic at her campus security job the night before. However, the lack of footprints in the snow, confirmed by local resident Steve Loud, who drove by that night and saw no tracks, contradicted this idea, as did Maura's experience as a hiker familiar with the White Mountains from family camping trips. The tracking dog's findings further supported the idea that she had left the scene in a vehicle, not on foot, making hypothermia less likely. The theory of foul play, however, was the one Maura's family held onto most tightly. Fred and Julie Murray, Maura's sister, believed she had been abducted, pointing to the short window of time, less than 19 minutes, between her last sighting by Bruce Atwood and the police's arrival. "Someone took her," Fred told the Associated Press in 2014, his voice heavy with grief. "There's no way she could have disappeared that fast on her own." Julie echoed this in a 2024 interview with Boston 25 News, saying, "The overwhelming consensus in our family is that she was met with foul play." They highlighted Maura's vulnerability that night, her mental state strained by recent events, including the credit card incident, the car crash, and the distressing phone call, combined with her decision to drive a barely functional car to a remote area, as factors that might have made her an easy target for a predator. The lack of evidence, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, made it impossible to confirm this theory, but it remained the family's guiding belief, a conviction that fueled their relentless search for answers. As the years passed, the investigation saw sporadic developments, but none brought the closure the family sought. In 2009, the case was transferred to the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit, a move that offered a glimmer of hope, but the unit's limited resources meant progress was slow. Searches continued, including a 2019 excavation of a basement near the crash site, which yielded only a piece of pottery, and a 2022 search in Landaff and Easton, 5 miles east of the crash site, following a tip about a young person seen moving quickly that night, which also turned up nothing. The items in Maura's car, textbooks, workout gear, and the alcohol, offered a snapshot of her life but no clear answers. Stains on the car's ceiling were tested and found not to be blood, dispelling some theories of foul play at the scene, but the car itself, stored at the New Hampshire State Police headquarters in Concord, remained off-limits to the family, a source of ongoing frustration. "They won't even let us see it," Julie told Murray in 2025, her voice tinged with exasperation. By April 2025, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit officially closed the active investigation into Maura's disappearance, citing a lack of new leads and the passage of time as reasons to reclassify the case as inactive, though they stated it could be reopened if new evidence emerged. Chief Miles Madison, in a 2024 interview with Boston 25 News, said, "We've exhausted all avenues at this point. Without a body, a crime scene, or new witnesses, we can't move forward, but we'll never close the door completely." The decision was a devastating blow to the family, who had held on to hope for over 2 decades, but it also marked a turning point, forcing them to confront the reality that they might never know what happened to Maura. Fred, now in his late 70s, sat in his living room in Connecticut on the day the news broke, staring at a photo of Maura from her high school track days, her smile bright and her eyes full of determination. "I always thought I'd find her," he whispered to Julie, who sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "I thought I'd bring her home." For Julie, the end of the active investigation was a moment of reckoning, but also a chance to redefine what closure meant for the family. She had launched her podcast, Media Pressure, the untold story of Maura Murray, in 2024 to reclaim her sister's narrative, and in the final episode, aired in March 2025, she spoke directly to Maura, her voice breaking with emotion. "I don't know where you are, but I hope you know how much we love you," she said. "We've done everything we could to find you, and now we have to let you go in our own way. But you'll always be with us." The podcast had not only raised awareness, but also connected the family with others who had lost loved ones to unsolved cases, creating a community of support that helped them heal. Julie also established the Maura Murray Scholarship in 2023, a fund to support nursing students, ensuring that Maura's dream of helping others lived on through the lives she inspired. The public's fascination with Maura's case, which began with the rise of social media in 2004, had by 2025 turned her into a symbol of the true crime genre, often cited as the first crime mystery of the social media age. Online forums like Reddit and TikTok had buzzed with theories over the years, some suggesting a cover-up by law enforcement, others speculating that Maura had been targeted by a serial killer, despite police dismissing a connection to other cases like the 2004 disappearance of Brianna Maitland in Vermont. Julie had often expressed frustration with this speculation, telling Boston 25 News in 2024, "The wild theories online, it's another layer of pain for us." But the attention also kept Maura's name alive, ensuring that her story continued to resonate, a reminder of the thousands of missing persons cases that remain unsolved and the families who wait for answers. Maura's disappearance also left a broader legacy, shining a light on systemic issues surrounding missing persons cases. It highlighted the challenges of investigating in rural areas with limited resources, the lack of manpower for cold cases, and the emotional toll on families left in limbo. Her case prompted legislative changes, like the creation of New Hampshire's Cold Case Unit in 2009, and inspired advocacy for better support systems for the families of the missing. It also brought attention to the role of mental health, with the family's openness about Maura's struggles encouraging a dialogue about the pressures young adults face. The credit card incident, the car crash, and the distressing phone call that left her distraught painted a picture of a young woman under immense stress, possibly struggling with anxiety or depression she kept hidden. "She needed help, and we didn't see it," Julie said in her podcast, her voice soft with empathy. This acknowledgement helped destigmatize mental health discussions, encouraging others to seek support and highlighting the need for better resources. As the investigation closed, the family held a final vigil at the crash site on Route 112 on February 9, 2025, marking the 21st anniversary of Maura's disappearance. The air was cold, the snow falling gently as it had that night so many years ago, and a small group gathered: Fred, Julie, Maura's siblings, and a few close friends. They placed a wreath of white roses at the spot where Maura's car had been found, its petals stark against the snow, and lit candles that flickered in the darkness. Julie spoke softly, her words carried by the wind. "We love you, Maura," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "We'll always love you. Wherever you are, we hope you've found peace." Fred, his shoulders hunched against the cold, added, "I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home, kiddo, but I'll see you again someday." The group stood in silence, the candles casting a warm glow on their faces. a moment of closure that was not about answers, but about letting go. Maura Murray's story ends where it began, on a snowy road in the White Mountains, a place that holds the mystery of her fate in its quiet embrace. The investigation may have closed, the theories may have faded, but her legacy endures, a call for justice, for compassion, for understanding. She remains a symbol of the missing, a reminder to hold our loved ones close, to listen to those who are struggling, and to never stop advocating for those who cannot speak for themselves. As the snow falls each winter, it covers the stretch of Route 112, a silent witness to a mystery that may never be solved, but also to a love that will never fade, a love that whispers through the wilderness, carrying Maura's name into eternity. Maura Murray's disappearance on that snowy night in 2004 remains an unsolved mystery, a whisper in the wilderness of the White Mountains that continues to echo through time. The investigation may have closed in 2025, with no answers to the question of what happened to the 21-year-old nursing student. But her story has transcended the confines of a cold case, becoming a symbol of resilience, loss, and the unyielding search for truth. For her family, the end of the active search marked a shift from seeking answers to preserving her memory, a way to honor the vibrant young woman who loved running, dreamed of nursing, and touched countless lives with her kindness. Maura's legacy lives on through initiatives like the Maura Murray Scholarship, supporting aspiring nurses, and through the advocacy of her sister Julie, whose podcast Media Pressure has shed light on the challenges of missing persons cases. Her story has inspired changes, from the creation of New Hampshire's cold case unit to a broader awareness of mental health struggles, reminding us to listen to those who are silently suffering. As the snow falls each winter on Route 112, it blankets the spot where Maura was last seen, a quiet reminder of a mystery that endures, but also of a love that will never fade, a love that keeps her name alive, whispering through the years, a lasting echo of a life that still matters.